Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RocketTopInsider.com. I am joined by Matt Ray of VR2. You can find them at vr2.site. No Brandon again this episode. Hopefully, we're going to try to do a second episode this week, and hopefully we'll get Brandon on and have all three of us on for probably, I'd say, a mailbag episode, because we're due for a mailbag episode. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions, not just about the current 2020 class, but also about the 2021 class, because that's really kicking into high gear now, with Tennessee bringing a lot of kids in for junior day stuff over the weekend and here in the next couple weeks as well. But Matt, we have to, it would be wrong of us not to start out by talking about Jay Hardy. And at this point, of us recording this podcast here on Tuesday afternoon, I'm assuming most of you guys or people listening, you all have probably heard, I guess most of the details at this point about how it all went down, about him signing with Auburn but then not releasing it, or him not releasing it, or whatever, and then Tennessee's coaches going and seeing him lying on that same day when Austin Price of VolQuest first put out that, hey, we've heard that he has signed, and then Hardy tweeting at him, I have not signed, and then I think maybe an hour later Auburn tweets out an official tweet from their official Twitter account welcoming him in as a signed prospect. Before we get into kind of our reaction and stuff to it, Matt, I have never, ever seen anything like this in recruiting. We knew when the early sign period got brought in that we would see some weird stuff, and guys can sign the financial aid agreement, and that's not a binding thing. I remember talking about it. We used to do RTI radio when Daniel Lewis was still the editor here at RTI, and he and I talked about on air that you have a case. You will probably see cases where kids sign financial aid agreements to like 5 different schools, but then that's not binding, so they're not signing their NLI. Then that would be an issue, and then all different stuff we've seen over the past couple years of kids trying to sign again the early sign period and then waiting until like the All-American game to announce and whatnot. And that's fine. That letting that kid have their moment it's cool. We saw in the first early sign period, Jameer Johnson signed with Tennessee, but then he didn't announce it until, I want to say it was right after Christmas is when he announced it. It was about a week and a half or so after the early signing period was over when he came out and said, yeah, by the way, I signed with Tennessee. I'm not just committed to him, I signed with them. So we've seen things like that, but Matt, I have never seen anything to this degree where you have, just call it this, a kid or his family both lying to Tennessee and lying to media, because that's why I want to get your reaction on it too, because you just interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and then all this happened, and he talked with you guys about, kind of outlined a little bit what Tennessee needs to do to kind of flip him, and talking about, his relationship with Tennessee's coaches and everything. Wasn't acting like he was signed and acting like he was still open in his recruitment and everything. I'm curious your reaction to it, because I've never seen anything like this. I've not interviewed Jay Hardy. I remember early on when he first got the offer from Tennessee, I tried to contact him, and he was very, as we've talked about before, he's just kind of not great about contacting back a lot of times. So I never actually got to interview him, but I did DM him a few times back earlier on in the process. But you've got to talk to him several times. What was your reaction when you saw this, Matt?
Hey, it's it's the most unique situation that I can think of, and I truly don't have an understanding of it. Like you mentioned there earlier, Austin is the guy that broke the news, and Austin's one of the best at what he does. And for him to go out and put that out just like that, you knew that there had to be some substance to it, because he's not going to put his professional reputation on the line like that. I had it sent to me probably 7 times within 2 minutes. It might seem like my phone blew up. So I reached out to Jay, just trying to confirm with him. I don't know who Austin's sources are or anything like that. I just tried to confirm with Jay, and he messaged me back and told me, no, it's not true, I haven't signed. And then I guess a few minutes later, it was he commented back to Austin's Twitter post that that wasn't true. He hadn't signed. And then, like you said, in an hour, Auburn has released that yes, he in fact did sign. It's a very strange situation. I don't understand what the benefit would be from lying. I understand that he wanted to sign with his team in February. I get that. But if you wanted to sign with your team in February, just cut the interviews off, cut the, just say no, cut the interviews off, let Tennessee know, and, keep everybody in the dark, and you can still sign with your teammates in February, or fake sign, I guess is what it would be, because you signed in December. But yeah, I don't see a real benefit from lying, leading Tennessee coaches on. Now, at the same time, the Tennessee coaches, did they drop the ball a little bit? Yeah, I think they kind of dropped the ball a little bit, but at what point do you take somebody for their word? Because if it wasn't in there on the first day and it wasn't in there till late the second day, then yeah, maybe the kid's telling you the truth. Maybe he didn't sign. It's easier than a check. So it's a strange situation. I've been around Jay probably nearly as much as I was around Harrison Bailey this season. He was a guy closer to home. It was a focal point for Tennessee recruiting, and like you said, not a great communicator back and forth. So you really have to go see him to get information. And just getting to know Jay, it doesn't really make any sense for him to repeatedly lie. 2 weeks ago he was blatantly lying to Dale about what Tennessee needed to do to flip him. Making it sound like the door was open, and Dale's a guy that's been around him a lot this season. So it doesn't make any sense, and I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to wrap their head fully around it. And the odd thing is Jay had a spot at Tennessee. He was always going to have a spot at Tennessee, in my opinion. They showed that by coming out to the basketball game, but dating back to August, it was Tennessee for him. I mean, it was Tennessee in August. It was Tennessee a week before he committed to Auburn, and then he committed to Auburn. And then, he wasn't going to roll Tennessee out. Just says that there's a strain on the relationship. Going to give him a chance. Made a big deal out of not signing. Saying he was in Florida, and then he did. There's no rhyme or reason as to why he did it, but it's just strange. I don't really know how to wrap my head around it or what to even really think about it.
Do you think? I'm curious on the whole Auburn aspect of it, because I wonder if maybe with Jay saying what he was, I hate to disparage a kid. He's 17 years old, or I guess he's 17, and everyone makes mistakes, and he is still a kid. I guess you can say a young adult or whatever, but he I made mistakes when I was that age. I make mistakes now at almost 27. I mean, we all make mistakes, and you don't want to hold it against him forever. But man, it feels like it really feels like here he's burned a lot of bridges that I don't know that he's ever going to be able to fix again. Not just in Chattanooga, but in Knoxville and Nashville and all across the state where we're Vol fans. Some I think have more rational kind of thinking. They are upset about it, obviously, but aren't gonna, I think, be crazy about it. But man, there are definitely people who, I mean, people have talked about what Kate Mays did a couple years ago. This is significantly worse than what Kate Mays did a couple years ago. I mean, this is straight up lying to Tennessee, lying to the media, and wasting coaches' times. I almost wonder, was he put up to it? Did Auburn have something to do with this? What all happened here? I don't think the SEC will get involved really necessarily with this. I think you might see a new rule put in place from Jay Hardy and all this stuff talking about when you can and can't keep secrets on when you have signed and stuff like that. I've heard Jason Swain talk about his rule proposal would be that if you sign early in the early signing period, but you want to keep a secret, you have until that last weekend of the All-American game to make it public, and then if you don't do it then, or you have to do it by then. You'll make your actual announcement of if you've signed, and then you're keeping it secret. So I like that idea. I just like you said, I don't really know what to make of this. It's bizarre to me that he did this. It's bizarre to me that Auburn would do this, because I mean Auburn has coaches who have coached with other coaches on Tennessee staff. You have Tracy Rocker and Rodney Garner, who played together in college. I mean, at some point, I know recruiting's a cutthroat business, and Tennessee's definitely, edged their way into recruits on different guys. You look at different battles that they've had with South Carolina, different battles they've had with probably Auburn with other recruits too. But man, this really just, to me, like you said, I think Tennessee does take some responsibility for this. And did they drop the ball some? Yes. But to me, this really reflects even more poorly on Auburn. And I think this really just hammers home the fact that what a lot of Vol fans, a lot of just SEC fans in general have said for years, that Auburn's probably the dirtiest recruiting program out there, at least in the SEC. I wouldn't say all of college football, because I don't know about all of college football, but at least in the SEC, this only reinforces that idea that Auburn is the dirtiest recruiting program in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely, going back to your first point, I think it absolutely burnt some bridges, definitely in the state of Tennessee. You look at Cade Mays and his situation, they're similar, but, they're different. For Cade, he committed to a Tennessee program, but decommitted from a completely different Tennessee program. I know I've talked about that a little bit. There was some, he was kind of hurt at the same time, I guess, and not enough to, warrant everything that went on, but there was a lot more factors there with Cade Mays than, and the one video where he said what he said, than the continual lying from Jay Hardy. Because at the same time, the Tennessee coaching staff was shocked when he committed to Auburn. He even said the day that he committed that he hadn't told the Tennessee coaching staff before, and when he left campus the week before from his official visit, he was committed to them. So, that makes the situation a whole lot more unique. Auburn, they had to know that Tennessee was still trying, without a doubt, and they without a doubt knew that Tennessee was trying when three or four of Tennessee's coaches are sitting in the stands, and Garner's sitting across from them.
Yep.
So they knew at that point that Tennessee was trying. How early did they know? We'll never know. But yeah, recruiting is a cutthroat business. I would put Auburn number 2 in the SEC behind another SEC school, but that's just that's just what I've heard, and that's just my personal preference. But it's close as far as being the dirtiest program. But there's an SEC school. There's an SEC school that's right up there with them.
I know you're talking about from the conversations we've had in the group chat. I know exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, so there's another SEC school that would do something just like that, and does a lot of stuff like that. We'll get kids to throw hats and do whatever. But
yep.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like you said, you hate to disparage your kids. I made a lot of mistakes when I was 17, 18-year-old. Still make them today at 26. But man, at some point, I think I talked to Austin Price about this back when Amari Thomas committed. We were talking about freshmen not being available to interview at Tennessee or like midway through the year. These kids are pros coming out of high school now with the way you covered. These kids are adults more or less. So, handling a situation like that, and I go back to Harrison Bailey. Tennessee gets off to a rough start. He still gave out interviews. They were short. They were brief. He didn't want to talk about the losses. He didn't want to talk about anything. Really wanted to focus on his teammates. They lost their first game of the year. He cut the interviews off, and he told every single person now. That's all you got to do. It's that simple. You don't have to lie. You just avoid the situation by removing yourself from it. So, kids are different. Kids have to learn on their own. You have to live and learn, and this is going to be one of those examples for Jay.
Yeah, and then you can add to further kind of complicate the matter and add more weird dynamics, as you have the Kevin Cooper situation. Kevin Cooper, a former Vol. It related to Jay Hardy. It's all of it just doesn't make sense to me. And I like you said, I think other players were involved here, whether it was Auburn, whether it was, I don't know, but it's something we probably won't know the answers to for a while, if we ever really do get to hear the actual answers, because Hardy's not going to talk about it. Auburn's not going to talk about it. Tennessee's coaching staff isn't going to talk about it. So I'm just curious on how these guys, Hardy had good relationships with a lot of the in-state kids that did sign with Tennessee, like Keyshawn Lawrence and Tyler Barron. And I know you all talked about before when Hardy announced his commitment to Auburn. It wasn't 10 seconds after that happened, where Tennessee, I think it was Keyshawn Lawrence, was calling him
Lawrence,
and asking him, was calling him and asking him, hey, what's up, man?
Yeah, I mean, and going back to that interview that he kind of lied all the way around through, about 2 weeks ago, I guess, he said in that interview that he had other programs reaching out to him as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, at what point do these coaches stop checking to see if they sign, or do they take these kids on their word? He said Georgia reached out, Alabama reached out, and Ole Miss reached out. Well, when you look at their classes, it actually does make perfect sense for all three of those programs to have reached out,
Yep.
And Georgia missed on Jordan Burch, and they need to fill the need. They've kind of always just stayed in contact with Hardy enough to maintain a relationship. Ole Miss is looking for anybody they can get, and if Lane Kiffin thinks he can come into Tennessee and pull a recruit, he's certainly going to do it. And then Alabama needs more defensive linemen in the class. So, again, I say Tennessee dropped the ball, and I think they did a little bit, but the blame's not to be placed there by any means.
Well, that's a situation I'm sure that we'll talk about in the future, because I'm sure other stuff will come out. I don't know, like I said, I don't know where we'll ever hear the full story, but I'm sure things we talked about it down the line. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at other times. I'm sure if we do the mailbag this week, someone will ask about it. But I will say, it doesn't look like Tennessee will get in trouble for it. There's the whole thing of, coaches aren't supposed to be able to contact recruits after they've signed their NLI and stuff. I don't think Tennessee is going to get in trouble for anything. We'll obviously update you guys on that if there is anything, but I don't think Tennessee is going to get in trouble for any kind of illegal contact in that situation. So we'll move on here now, and with Hardy officially off the board and signed to Auburn and part of their class, that kind of makes Dee Beckwith the top, in my opinion, at least realistic target for Tennessee in this 2020 class. He came on a visit this weekend, posted pictures of him both in football gear and basketball gear. You get to talk with him after his visit. Matt, what were your takeaways from him? Because I've heard different interviews and stuff too where he talked about, I think it was with Ryan Callahan or someone at 247, where he even mentioned that Florida, or I think they insinuated that Florida is still kind of leader for him at this point. But from your conversation with him, what did you take away from talking with Dee?
Yeah, I talked to Dee briefly there for just a few minutes after, everything was kind of winding down. Visit went really well. I think he got a chance to sit around and bond with the Tennessee coaching staff just a little bit better, which was something that he needed. Did find it interesting to talking to him about the quarterback position, because I don't think that there's any way they're going to bring in three quarterbacks in this class. But I think Dee's a little bit more polished passer than Jimmy Holiday, and maybe you give him that look. He's very explosive. Plays in a competitive division. Maybe I'm not really sure what they're going to do there, but it's very unique. I think both of those guys are going to probably find a different position if the quarterback room stays as full as it is. But he did get a chance to sit around and talk to the basketball program or the team just a little bit, get a look at it, see how they kind of prepare. So that was really good. It's big for him to be able to get there and talk and have a chance to let his family see, the atmosphere and everything else that was going on. Brandon's going to go see him tonight after his basketball game. They have a little bit better relationship than I have with him. I was just lucky enough to be able to catch up and talk to him. But Brandon should have more on him tonight. Looking ahead at the Florida visit, what he needs to see, what his family needs to see, and kind of just looking into how he's going to break down these last couple of weeks. I think there's a lot of Tennessee in his camp, and I think that's going to help Tennessee in the long run, obviously. When you got family backing you, I think that's always a good thing. But, ultimately it'll be Dee's decision, and I think it's going to be one that's going to be made in those final few days. And I don't think he's going to tip his hand. He's learned how to handle this recruitment thing pretty well. But, yeah, I think he's certainly the biggest target remaining on the board for Tennessee. I think he's going to get a look at tight end. I think he can be a major player there. So we'll see what happens, but I think Brandon should have some more for us tonight on that. It's something to talk about on the next podcast, because I'm sure we'll get plenty of questions about him during the mailbag. So I really just think it's going to come down to a comfort level. I think he feels that comfort level at Tennessee, but getting back to Florida and then more than likely getting the last official visit is going to be big too. We'll see what happens. He is giving himself some time to process everything. As far as I know, and right now the plan is to not take another official visit after this one to Florida. So.
Yeah, I was going to be surprised that Kentucky one panned out just for the way his schedule and stuff is. So it's always seemed like it was a Tennessee-Florida battle anyway. So that is surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't think Kentucky's really factoring in right now. So we'll see what happens. If he does have that comfort level with Tennessee, and Florida can't check every bit of that off this weekend, you have to think the Vols are in a good spot. Right now, it's as good as a coin flip in my opinion. He's done a pretty good job of, maintaining that both schools are really up there. So stuff like that generally changes once a day for kids. So until they really sit down and have to make that final decision.
Well, I'll tell you what, from watching his film and even seeing him in just pictures in the uniforms and stuff, he's a kid that looks like he could be a difference maker pretty early on. I don't know if he's going to play tight end, he's going to have to add some weight, but he does look very, very athletic. And just watching his film and stuff, he is a very athletic kid. I think he's underrated at what he is right now in the recruiting rankings. I don't think he's like a 5-star or anything like that, but I think he's a very, very good athlete, and he's a guy that can help you in a bunch of different areas. And the whole quarterback thing is interesting too. I know that's what he told you in the interview and stuff too. Is Tennessee mentioned let him play quarterback, and that quarterback room is going to be very interesting. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit here in a second too, because we haven't talked about the fact that Harrison Bailey got his 5th star on Rivals, and it's about dang time that happened for him. But Tennessee's quarterback room is going to be very fun to watch in the spring. I think we talked about that last podcast a little bit when we were talking about Harrison Bailey a little more in depth. But one other thing I want to talk about on the recruiting trail in the 2020 class, the other kind of big piece of news that's come out, besides the Jay Hardy stuff and obviously Dee Beckwith visiting this weekend, is that Tennessee is going to kick the tires and do their best to try and see if they can get Zachary Evans, the 5-star running back who, well, his recruitment has been very, very, very complicated. Matt, I think it's a good word to use for it. He is a top 20 overall prospect and number 1 running back in the country on 247 Sports. He signed initially with Georgia and then decided to back out of that signing. And now it's really kind of up in the air where it's going to be. It seemed like for a while there that Texas A&M was kind of the odds-on favorite for him to go there and that to be the school he's going to go to. He's taken official visits there, and Jay Graham has a good solid relationship with him. And I think he has a good relationship with Jimbo Fisher too. But then you see him take got an offer from Ole Miss. I think he visited them as well. Now Tennessee's coaches go and visit him. It's I don't really know what to make of this. I don't think Tennessee has a very good shot of getting Zach Evans. I'll just go ahead and say that. I think it's a very slim chance that Zachary Evans ends up being in the orange and white in this 2020 class. And with the way he signed his NLI, I think there's rules talking about he can't sign another NLI for a while. I don't know how that works out. We'll get that bridge if we need to. If it does seem like Tennessee is going to be a serious contender for him, but this is interesting to me, Matt. I didn't know if Tennessee would kick the tires with him or not, but sending Brian Niedermeyer, they're not just sending anybody, the ace recruiter, they're sending Moose out on the trail to go visit him over in Houston, Texas. He plays for North Shore over there. Right now Tennessee obviously doesn't have a running backs coach on the roster on staff, so you can't send that. But I mean, Niedermeyer is your guy. He's the guy you go send after these big targets. I think it's interesting. The only way I think Tennessee gets involved here, more than just kind of visiting him with a coach, is if they can get him to come back to campus. He was the guy that came and visited, I think, just once last year, kind of late last year, early last year, and it was a case where he came and visited Tennessee, I think, on his way down to see Georgia, or maybe opposite. I think he visited Georgia first and then came up to see Tennessee, but it wasn't like he purposely came to see Tennessee. He took an unofficial visit in January of last year, so it's been a year essentially since he last came to Knoxville. If you can get him to come on a visit to Knoxville, get an official visit this weekend or next weekend or whenever, I think that would make me kind of consider things. And with the fact that you have all the rumors and stuff about is Jay Graham going to come and be the running backs coach at Tennessee or whatever? If that happens, if they do land Jay Graham as the running backs coach at Tennessee, that only helps Tennessee with Zach Evans. So this is a very curious thing to me. At this point, I think it is a very slim chance that Tennessee ends up getting Zach Evans. But the fact that they're trying, to me, it says a lot about what they think their chances are, and it also says a lot about, in my opinion, what they think their current running back room is on the roster, and heading into the 2020 season as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. It's definitely kind of a statement that they're going to always go after the best players whenever they get the chance. Like you said, sending Niedermeyer out to see him is a big deal. Zach is a kid that his recruitment's been all over the place. I mean, at one point he had a top 14, I think it was. This was after the Under Armour Future 50 game last year. I talked to him briefly, asked him about Tennessee. He said, "Oh, they on my top 15 or whatever." And he said, "I got to update that." And then he updated it the next day and made it like a top 12. So he took Tennessee and somebody else off of it. I think Tennessee and maybe like Oregon or somebody off of it. Then deleted it altogether, deleted everything altogether, come back, had a few schools, had it down to just a few schools and added a few back. I mean, he's been all over the place the whole time. The off-field issues at North Shore, they're a little bit of a concern. I mean, you have to think they're a concern. I think that's the reason you send Niedermeyer out there, a young guy that can relate to him, can talk to him, and really get, a feel for, what kind of maturity level are we dealing with here? Can we do something with this? Tennessee's probably a pretty good spot for him. He's going to come to Tennessee. There's a running, the running backs room's crowded right now. We'll know if there's any departures soon, but right now it doesn't look like there has been any. He's going to have to come work. He has a big opportunity there. Like you said, it really comes down to getting him back to campus. Texas A&M, there's an apparent report out that Texas A&M's telling him that they want a commitment or they are moving on. Again, what does a commitment do with this kid? You know what I'm saying? He can't sign a national letter of intent. He has to show up at the summer if his grades and everything are fine. He can't sign a national letter of intent. If he's verbally committed to your school, publicly or not, it doesn't matter. He could show up at Tennessee just the same. He could show up at Ole Miss just the same. I find that report contradicting, but we'll see what happens with it. I think, like you though, it's ultimately going to come down to, can Tennessee get him back to campus? How receptive is he? Jeremy Pruitt will have a visit to use. I do think Zach Evans probably will make a public decision, around the time of National Signing Day. And I think when he does, that there's a pretty good chance that he will stick with it. I think it has been, there has been a lot of turmoil for him. I think he would like to clear the air and start with a fresh slate. And if he gets the opportunity to, then that's big for him. So, it's good to see Tennessee get their foot in the door with a guy like this at least and try to make a run. And if they can, man, talk about a boost to your class. I mean, not to knock anybody on the roster, but there's not a Zach Evans on this roster.
Nope. Zach Evans is, from what all I can see, he's the real deal. He's a guy that he's put up some really good numbers, but he's not just done it against weak competition. He's not doing it in a small classification. He's doing it in one of the toughest classifications in Texas. In Texas football, it's not a small deal over in Texas. Texas takes their high school football super seriously. He's in one of the better classifications there, and he's put up I think it was 1,600 yards of rushing this past season, 20 plus touchdowns, and I think he's done that for 3 straight years essentially.
He's really good out of the backfield too. He's really good out of the backfield, and his ability to create mismatches with linebackers and run after catch is just—he's a phenomenal athlete. He's got some of the best feet I think I've ever seen. He can get in and out of a cut just extremely well, which I think makes him so effective in the pass game. But his ability to hit the hole, and he's he's deceivingly big. I guess he's taller than he looks. He looks kind of slender, but he's not. He's big. But his ability to use those feet as he reads blocks and hit the smallest crease and explode through them, you just don't see that out of backs that big. So he's a tremendous talent. But you have to have everything else work off the field, disciplinary and grade wise. And I think Tennessee feels confident that if they could get him here, they could straighten him up. There's not a lot of trouble in the Tennessee locker room. There's not. They know what they have. They know what they need. And I think if they get him here, they can fix a lot of those issues. So I think maybe they can sell him on that, because I think that's something he needs to hear too.
Size-wise and the way he carries himself and kind of how his game is, he reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara, because Kamara was about 5'11", 205 at Tennessee. Evans is about 5'11", 200. And like you said, that Kamara played bigger than what he was. People when he first got here kind of wanted to label him as a scat back. That kid was tough. He still obviously is tough in the NFL now, but when he was at Tennessee, I remember watching him and being blown away by how he wasn't absolutely the fastest straight line speed guy, but he could make a cut and go. He could lower that shoulder. He could break tackles, and I just see a lot of that with Evans. I don't know that Evans will be the next Alvin Kamara wherever he goes, but just the way he's built, the size of his body, the kind of the way he carries himself, and the way he plays reminds me quite a bit of what Kamara did at Tennessee, and then obviously now what he's doing with the New Orleans Saints in the NFL. But Matt, to kind of wind down this episode of the podcast here, I want to talk a little bit about numbers, because with Hardy off the board, we talked about Beckwith's probably the top realistic option for Tennessee. He has a spot. There's no doubt about it. Dee Beckwith has a spot in Tennessee's 2020 class. And we also had this past week, Kyrie Miller officially reopened his recruitment. He's no longer part of Tennessee's class. So right now Tennessee has one player committed to them who did not sign, and that's Darian Williamson. It's expected he'll probably be a part of this class and maybe some kind of blue shirt capacity, but there's no guarantee of that, obviously. His spot can be taken by someone else. But I'd say Tennessee probably has, whether or not they're going to save a spot for a grad transfer or whatever, I'd say anywhere between probably 2 to 4, probably more 2 to 3 spots remaining in this class. They can maybe back count a little bit and do a blue shirting option with their Velus Jones Jr. or Cade Mays. We talked about that last podcast. But with bringing those guys in, that obviously does take at least one spot from your class. And the Miles Jones, I think, is coming in as a walk-on, so that's not going to affect the numbers in this class. But Dee Beckwith has a spot. I got to talk with Dylan Spencer, who is an offensive lineman down in Alabama, who played at Madison Central along with Jimmy Holiday, who signed with Tennessee in December. I got to talk with him after his visit over the weekend. We got an offer from Tennessee, so if you want to check that out, that's RocketTopInsider.com. I got to talk with him. You have him. You have Malachi Weidman. You have Jakari Caldwell, still an option for Tennessee. I'm curious on what this last spot is going to do, because it doesn't seem like Tennessee's really in on any other defensive linemen. So obviously, missing out on Jay Hardy, that you don't really have any other defensive linemen that you're pursuing. So I don't think you're going to be able to fill that kind of hole with someone else. I think at this point, it's Dee Beckwith, and then you're taking best available. You're taking whoever you can get at this point. I think Tennessee would like to have a true tackle prospect. That's why they're looking at a guy like Dylan Spencer. That's why they offered him. And also he played defensive line. He played offensive line in high school. He's been focusing specifically on offensive line since his high school career ended. He got rave reviews at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game in December. I think Martin Simmons of 247 put him as one of his top 8 or 9 guys in the practices early on. And that's why you've seen teams like Kansas, Missouri, Mississippi State, and Tennessee offer him. He visited Tennessee this past weekend, got an offer. He's going to visit Kansas and Missouri still over the next couple weeks, and he's committed to Southern Miss, but I don't think he's sticking with the Golden Eagles. I think he's going to go to a Power 5 program. He's definitely one of those kids that has benefited from holding off on signing in the early signing period and letting his tape kind of get out there and do some other stuff to really help his stock rise some. But Malachi Weidman came on to visit, committed to FSU. That's going to be a tough pull, but I think Tennessee, all the guys they're looking at right now are guys that would fit a spot they would like to have. They would like to have another receiver. They would like to have a true tackle prospect, because all the offensive linemen they brought in, even including Cade Mays, I think project as interior guys. Jakari Caldwell, obviously another receiver. In your opinion, Matt, where do you think Tennessee goes with that final spot? Like I said, there's no guarantee Dee Beckwith comes to Tennessee, but he's got a spot if he wants in. There's no doubt about it. He's got a spot. Taking his spot away, I think Tennessee will probably take one more. Maybe two, but I'm just going to kind of say one more. Where do you think Tennessee would go with that final spot? Do you think they go offensive line? Do you think they're going to go with the receiver? Because we talked about before, maybe they'll go after a defensive back, but it doesn't seem like they're really pushing that hard for another 2020 defensive back right now with the Ole Miss commit, with him saying he's not going to come visit after all. It doesn't seem like that's an option. So it seems like receiver and offensive line are kind of the two ones they're really targeting. Where do you think Tennessee goes with that final spot, if there's just one spot remaining, if Dee Beckwith is part of this class?
Dee Beckwith is part of this class. I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably receiver. If you can get the Caldwell kid or the Malachi Wideman, I think you get them. If you can get both of them and you have 3 spots, I think you take both of them, and you have suddenly reloaded your receiver room. You've given your roster a lot of flexibility. If you were planning to move Jimmy Holiday to the slot or do whatever with him, you give him a lot of other options. Dee Beckwith's the guy that can play receiver. I think he's going to, like I said, see some tight end if he can add the weight. He's already adding some good weight. I think you're going to give your roster a lot of flexibility if you add both of those guys, 2 big frame guys that can go down the field, stretch it vertically, and kind of play in the offense that Harrison Bailey's used to playing in. You definitely have your speed addressed with Velus Jones Jr. and Jalen Hyatt and Jimmy Callaway, who seems to have been forgotten here lately. There's the option that Callaway could play cornerback. Several schools are recruiting him to play cornerback. So, you have to think that, Tennessee could at least give him a look there. I mean, Jeremy Pruitt's, he's that guy. So, Callaway doesn't have any bad habits. And I'll go back to what Jeremy Pruitt told Trayvon Flowers coming out of high school. I've had an exceptional track record coaching defensive backs, and I've done it with guys that have come out of high school with bad habits. You don't have any bad habits because you haven't really, played there that much. You don't have any habits that I can't fix in just a matter of time, and it's the same way for Callaway. So, you give your roster a lot of flexibility if you're able to add those 2 receivers. If you have 3 spots remaining, but I think the last one's going to go to a receiver. But I can, there's certainly a scenario where you may not land both of them. You may not land either one of them. Dylan Spencer can easily find his way in this class if he wants to be a part of it. So it's going to be fun to watch, but I think it's just like you said, to start off, best available.
Spencer's intriguing to me because he's definitely, in my opinion, he's definitely a project. He's not a guy that, he's not the Kyrie Miller level of project, and I think that's one reason you saw Kyrie Miller move on, is because he's more of a project. He's got to lose some weight. He's a good 2 to 3 years away from being able to contribute, kind of no matter where he goes. Whereas Dylan Spencer, I think he's not that far behind. He's got a great frame, around 6'3", 6'4", 305 pounds, somewhere around there. He's got good weight, a good body. He's very athletic. That's something that, watching his film, stood out to me. And then talking with him, he mentioned that he thinks that one of his best traits is his feet and his mobility, that he can get to that next level really quickly. And watching him play, that's definitely true. He would be interesting to me because Tennessee has already started to get in a lot on some high-level offensive linemen, offensive tackle prospects, especially in the 2021 class. They just had a 5-star come visit them this past weekend, who I wrote about, but I think you all got to potentially interview, if I'm remembering correctly. But I'll let you kind of plug some of that stuff here in a second too, because you guys got to talk to a lot of 2021 recruits over the weekend. But I kind of tend to agree with you. I think if they have a spot available after Dee Beckwith, and if they can get Wideman, I think obviously he's the one they take. But Jakari Caldwell is interesting. I don't know that they'll be able to get either one of them. In a perfect world, if you're choosing between those two, that's great. Maybe you take both of them, but I don't know that Tennessee's chances of landing either Wideman or Caldwell are very high. I think Spencer is a little bit higher, but also at the same time, does he want to go? He's got offers from Missouri, Mississippi State, and Kansas. What's his preference there? So he lives down in Mississippi. So does he want to go somewhere kind of closer to home because, I mean, I don't really know how far away all those schools are, but they're all within kind of the same area for him. I think Tennessee might be a little bit closer than Kansas, or well, definitely Kansas, but then Missouri as well. So that'll be interesting to see what does Tennessee do with that final spot if they get Dee Beckwith, which, like you said, I think it's kind of a coin toss at this point. But Matt, I think that's a good place to kind of end this podcast. I already plugged one interview I did with Recruit on here, and we'll obviously have some of our own recruiting stuff, but we also obviously are partnered with you guys and share a lot of the stuff you guys do. What do you have at VR2.site that you currently have on the site right now? And I know you guys were just down at the Senior Bowl down in Mobile and got to see the festivities there, and they introduced and measured Juwan Jennings and Darrell Taylor. So I know you were just down there. You have an interview up talking about what I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the guys said about Juwan being one of the most unique draft prospects he's ever seen. So you guys have that, and you have tons of 2021 interviews. So what do you guys have on the site now? What do you guys have coming on the site in the future, Matt?
Yeah, we've got a lot of 2021 interviews on the site right now. We're trying to think through who and all we have and who and all we have coming. A couple of 4-star linebackers visited Tennessee this weekend. Trinelius Tatum and Ian Jackson had interviews with both those guys coming. Should be up tonight. Javen Burke, who is an unranked athlete out of Bradley Central, who has exploded onto the scene, who is a really fun athlete to watch, has been all over the place in Cleveland and Chattanooga. Started at Cleveland, I believe, went to McCallie, back at Bradley Central. He's a tremendous talent. Been really fun to watch. Have an interview coming with him. Should be up shortly. Trying to think back here who and all we do have. Actually, there's a pretty big number of guys. Jalen Brown, an offensive guard from down in Montgomery, Alabama. He's another big guy. Tennessee's back in Montgomery looking at another big offensive guard that's over 320 pounds. At one point, Jalen was ranked in the top 400 prospects in the country. He dropped a little bit with no reasoning why. But, most guards do drop. Most interior linemen aren't rated highly for long. Once other players start filling into the class, it's very easy to drop those interior linemen. Let's see who else. Should have something coming out on Eli Sutton soon. He didn't visit. He did not visit, but and doesn't have plans to visit relatively soon. He's doing something a little different. He's visiting, we got about 5 schools standing out, but he's visiting some schools that maybe aren't standing out, but from his standpoint, he wants to take a look at very, very high on academics. So he visited Duke. He stopped by North Carolina, picked up an offer while he was there, going to visit Northwestern. So some academic schools that he wants to look at. Going to get down to Miami. Should be back to Tennessee sometime this spring, though. Malachi Bennett, a 3-star wide receiver from Alabama, teammates with Reginald Perry. His interview's up on the website. Christian Velo, the 2021 4-star quarterback that Tennessee has kind of honed in on recently. Interview up with him. 3-star defensive lineman Zion Rucker and Noah Collins, interviews up with both of those guys. And then, should have something on Hudson Wolf coming around the corner. Tennessee was in to see him this week. But coming out of the Senior Bowl, have some stuff with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the game, talking about Juwan Jennings. I was lucky to slide in and get the final question of the press conference in yesterday. Nice. With Jim. I mean, it was just room loaded with probably about 200 reporters, it seemed like, and he did a great job. It felt like he took questions for an hour and 15 minutes, which is unheard of. But it was just like you scream Jim and hope that you're the guy that's, hanging in there that he's pointing at. So I was able to get a question in with him about Juwan. It was the only one asked about Juwan, and he gave a really good in-depth answer as to why he thinks Juwan is the most unique player in the draft class. That's up. Caught up with Juwan briefly in the lobby, previewed his expectations, and then later tonight, once I get off the road, we'll have a couple of video interviews with Juwan and Darrell Taylor, talking about the Senior Bowl, reliving a couple of moments from, the Tennessee, their Tennessee days. Jawan actually talked a little bit about what he felt like he would show NFL draft scouts if he had the chance. And, I asked particular plays because I was hoping, a little bit more for a breakdown of their skill set, but both guys went a little bit differently. And Jawan actually pinpointed 2 games, and I think it's easy games to agree with, the Tennessee and South Carolina games from this year. That's the thing talked about the most down there with Jawan, is his ability to run after catch and make people tackle him. Every scout that I've talked to, and Jawan's already talked to 13 scouts, and they're in a lot of testing, but everyone I talked to is his ability to run after catch. So that's going to be something that you hear from him until, he's done. So we'll have some more content coming from the Senior Bowl. And then after that, we'll be back on the road seeing some more recruits.
Awesome. Be sure to check that out at VR2.site. They're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at VR2. You can find them pretty easy and all there. I think Twitter handle is @_VR2_. They're, like I said, they're easy to find on all their social media platforms. You can find us at RockyTopInsider.com or Rocky Top Insider on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And that's the way a lot of you interact with the podcast, is by watching/listening on YouTube. So we appreciate that a whole lot. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on notifications so you can see when our videos get uploaded to YouTube. And we appreciate all of you tuning in for this episode. We'll be hopefully back again later on this week to try to do a mailbag one and have all 3 of us on here and get Brandon back in the fold. We miss him, so hopefully we'll have that time to do a mailbag and answer some questions for you guys too. But signing off for Matt, I'm Nathaniel. This has been another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast.